is going to be This Is Now Bridge to a Better World. I was just putting Drinking Bird back together because he was just so excited about doing it all that he came to pieces just right at the last minute.
As it happens with many of us at times, we get all excited and we fall to pieces.
Yeah. Isn't there a song by that name?
Well, yeah, but that's not about getting all excited. That's about a broken heart.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
That's one of my favorite songs. I love Patsy.
Yeah.
Some nights I like to sing Patsy really loud.
Yeah.
Yeah, if we ever go to karaoke, I'm picking Patsy.
I haven't really caught you doing that. It's interesting.
Really?
Yeah.
Because I do.
Yeah, well, I believe you.
Yeah. She tends to avoid the kitchen while I do dishes. This is what happens. Patsy, my inner Patsy comes out as I wash dishes.
I see. Okay.
Are we ready?
Yeah, I think so. Let's.
Good morning.
Good morning. This is called "This Is Now Bridge to a Better World." I'm Teresa Mitchell, and this is Ani Raven Haynes, and this is Neil the dog. You can't see him, but you can hear his
the tippy tappy of giant feet.
His toes in his, not his nose. Yes, he does. He's good at tippy tapping. Well, I want to go for some local news first, actually, because we're breathing some smoke from the Camp Creek fire, which is up, sort of off in the direction of Sandy. On August 31st, the Bureau of Land Management announced that it closed the bicycle trail site, the Sandy Ridge Recreation Trails, about 40 miles east of Portland, just off Highway 26, due to its proximity to the Camp Creek fire. And Willamette Week writes that blaze is centered about 10 miles northeast of the city of Sandy in the Mount Hood National Forest. Public access is temporarily cut off to the 17 miles of trail. And it says that a lightning strike sparked the Camp Creek fire, which you've been smelling for the last week or so. On August 24th, it has since charred 1,900 acres, according to the National Interagency Fire Center. And at this point, it is considered 0% contained, which I'm sorry to hear. The news from Willamette Week is a few hours old, and I'm just kind of hoping that they contain it soon. I've noticed also that firefighting planes have been scooping into the Columbia. So if you go down there near Rooster Rock, that's kind of fun to watch. And I certainly wish them the best, because that area supplies the famously delicious drinking water to the city of Portland. So
many surrounding areas.
Yeah. And I want to wish you a happy Labor Day because, it's Labor Day. And also because the NLRB has been reappointed, or people have been reappointed. Let me start over on that. The NLRB has gotten new appointments from the Biden administration. And so they have turned from their decades-long, generations-long habit of being a captured regulatory agency. And instead they are supporting the...
we are in very close proximities, and sometimes my leg will move and it disrupts your chain of thought. And I'm sorry about my moving leg.
Not that a fly had landed on my head or something. Well, the NLRB hasn't been friendly, and everyone knows it. And so I think that this piece of news I'm going to lay on you right now has been a little slow getting around to workers and maybe to labor unions. And it goes like this. It's over. They're on our side now. And the way it happened is these appointees decided that the usual illegal but scarcely enforceable actions that employers take after card check are not going to be tolerated anymore, and are going to result in a no election win for the union. This is brilliant. So let me explain this again.
Please do.
Card check is where you have to get 51% of the. You've gone through it
recently. Well, recently being 6 years ago. Yeah. I guess 10 years ago was our card check. So. Something like that. It's close to that.
Half the workers have to say, well, we'll consider a union. And when you do that, then the employer is welcome to just roll over and say, okay, well, I guess you guys are unionized. Go ahead. They don't do that much anymore, especially corporations do not do that. And what they do instead is they begin a program of intimidating the union, and they hire there's an entire industry, a well-paid industry, to bust unions. And they are attorneys, and they come in and they have films, and they have speakers, and they have a system of intimidation, and they they have forced company meetings. Everyone has to get together and watch an anti-union film. And of course, they'll say, oh, it's not an anti-union film. They just lie their butts off constantly about it. And of course, what they'll do in the meantime is that they will break the law by firing anyone associated with the union, totally intimidate everyone, and make sure that they know that, sure, you can consider a union if you want to be unemployed. And man, this works. And it has kept unionization spiraling down the drain for decades and decades. Well, now they're not going to get away with it, because the new ruling is when they do that firing, especially if they fire anybody, then it's over and the union wins. Period. That's all. There's no election. Just let that sink in. That's a different world.
That's a default that actually works for the workers.
Yeah, this really needs to get around. And the other thing is, let me pull up this details on this from Bloomberg Law. The other thing, well, the employers said, well, we got to at least have our free speech and be able to cram the employees all into a room and show them anti-union stuff all day while we glare at them. NLRB says no, and it is illegal, and it's a violation of something. We all know it's a violation because they intend to violate you real good. But they're not going to be able to do that either. And they're just, the employers, especially a group in Texas, are just absolutely, I think the technical term is apeshit about this. And they took it to court and tried to overturn that, and they failed that. So now they can't force you into those damn meetings anymore. So if you've been thinking about organizing a place, or if you know somebody who says, well, I'd love to have a union, but they do those meetings and it's so hard, tell them about this. Tell them about this, because this is a wonderful thing. And hello to John and Jabara. Glad to see y'all here. So I'm just fired up about this, and I think it does make it a very good Labor Day indeed. I hope that y'all can just spread that news. I'm going to try to spread it on social media and stuff.
And in more Labor Day news, excuse me, the PALS workers are striking on Labor Day.
Oh, yeah.
At this point, they're calling a one-day strike. They are hoping that this will spur management to actually meet the demands of the workers who are, making PALS a wonderful, welcoming, amazing bookstore, which it is. And I love the idea that Portland has one of the largest brick and mortar bookstores in the country. I love the fact that we have such a quirky and amazing bookstore with great staff picks and recommendations, and staff you can go in and have great book chats with. Well, they're being underpaid. Most of them are not making a living wage in the Portland area. Many of them are capped at below, 85% of PALS union workers are currently making below the area's living wage, with many workers being capped at below that living wage, including workers who have been there for decades. So it's time for workers to strike. The recent strike vote, 92% of workers voted to walk off the job. They last struck in 2003, but plan to hold a one-day unfair labor strike on Monday, on Labor Day, before they resume negotiations. And so they're asking, of course, for public support. And folks can join them at the location on Burnside downtown or the location on Hawthorne, and I think the Cedar Hills location as well. And I wish I had the actual times written down that you can join them, but I will find that by the time Teresa finishes the next story.
It's always fun to go out to the picket line and bring them some goodies and
support workers.
Yeah, it's been a while. I remember supporting the airline stewards union many years ago, and they couldn't stop being stewards. I show up and they're like, "Here, have some snacks." But doesn't that go the other way? Well, anyway, so in other news, the IRS has been caught out, according to an article in The Hill. Hundreds of IRS employees from the IRS Chief Counsel's office have been caught taking money from the very people that they're supposed to be monitoring. 496 IRS employees were monitored, and 241 of them got paid by a large accounting firm, and 255 by a large corporation. The report follows a request by Senator Elizabeth Warren and Representative Pramila Jayapal to look into the revolving door between the IRS and the accounting industry. This is part of how regulation is captured. It isn't just paying them off. It's saying, well, you can have a job with us, and your family can have a job with us, and your cousin can have a job with us if they want it bad enough. And that sort of thing works really, really well. Changing topics again, for the 6th week in a row, hospitalizations due to COVID-19, that's like COVID-19, only more harsh, COVID-19 have crept upwards. The latest tracking from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention show that hospital admissions have climbed by nearly 19% during the week ending August 19th. Now they're climbing 19% from not a particularly high level, so it's not a slam yet, but it is concerning. And they write at the beginning of June, the weekly share, all of this information always lags because of data collection. At the beginning of June, the weekly share of COVID-19 tests coming back positive was 4%. Now the figure has more than tripled to 13.4%. And the region made up of Texas, Oklahoma, Louisiana, Arkansas, and New Mexico, the most recent positivity rate hit 18% per the CDC. Now, I don't know what that means, 18% of who. If it's 18% of the whole population, then wow, that's huge. But I think maybe it's not. It doesn't explain here, so I'm just going to leave that number out there. Jennifer Horney, PhD, director of the epidemiology program at the University of Delaware in Newark, New Jersey, says, quote, with COVID-19 infections on the rise, concurrent with increased risk for infection with other cold weather respiratory viruses like influenza and RSV, many people might want to consider wearing a high-quality mask in crowded indoor spaces, end quote. And I think that I will take that seriously, particularly when I go see a movie. I'm going to spend less time eating the popcorn and more time clamping that mask on my face, especially if it's crowded. Because who needs it? Who needs it? And with the elections coming up.
I was going to say, I know that you had mentioned that hospitalizations are going up. It is important to note, as I've seen in several interviews with health professionals, public health officials, hospitalizations go up about 6 weeks after it's already circulating broadly in the community. And so when you're starting to see hospitalizations occurring at a greater rate, it's already been here for over a month. And so taking all mitigation measures now before it gets worse is a really good idea to really stop another serious outbreak of this pandemic. I'd love to say that it's over, just like the official political figures say it's over, but we're talking about science and health, and that's different than politics. So it is time to really start mitigating, even if shops don't have the signs requiring it. Probably a good idea, if you have stopped masking, to go back to that and to watch very carefully what this does over the next month, as we are now starting schools and generally moving inside, and either because of extreme heat, rain, or smoke, take your pick. It's really time to take it seriously. It also looks like the new variant is, different enough to escape inoculation so far, vaccines so far.
Which reminds me that Anthony Fauci said something about it that just kind of made me say, and you would too, because he said, in reference to the increase, he said, it's going to take out some of the weaker among us. So when he was in government, that was not Anthony Fauci talk. He was a bit more careful with that. And in the context, he made it clear that he wasn't talking about just giving up and going with the, what they used to call it, herd immunity bullshit.
Yes.
But what he said is true. It's like, if you're weakened by something else, then this is really quite dangerous, more dangerous than for anybody else. And so now, changing topics, I noticed that when the Republicans got up and did their, someone called it the International Olympics of Lying, got up and had a debate without President Trump, ex-President Trump, in the room. That's me falling for their rhetoric. They all call him President Trump. They won't call him ex-president. Anyway, Trump wasn't in the room, so all the others debated, and one of the people was Vivek Ramaswamy, who just struck me, this must be difficult to do amongst Republicans, just struck me as particularly slimy. And so I looked up, who is this guy? And the story of Vivek Ramaswamy has to go back to GlaxoSmithKline Pharmaceuticals, which produced an Alzheimer's drug that they were fired up about, I think more than a decade ago. And they gave it into trials. There are several levels of trials. And they finally just gave up on it and offered it for a low price on the market. And Ramaswamy's family evidently had enough money to buy the stuff. And so they got this fairly useless drug, almost completely useless, maybe slightly dangerous drug. And they gave it a different name. And they had their own pharmaceutical company. And here's this drug with a different name under a new pharmaceutical company. And they started talking about just how wonderful it was and how the first level of tests had indicated that maybe just this was the end of Alzheimer's. And I wonder if you remember this. It looked so encouraging. I was just like, oh, wow, end of Alzheimer's. It would be so great because I'm afraid of Alzheimer's as an older person who's, taking a lot of drugs. And, I don't want to get it. And so I'd be glad to see a cure come out. Well, it wasn't a cure. It was the same crap that it was before. And so what Vivek Ramaswamy was up to doing was pumping and then dumping. And so he managed to he got it into the media with both paid and unpaid methods, and got everyone talking about this new Alzheimer's drug that was just about to have its, doubtless highly successful third and definitive trial. And he knew it was crap, and his family knew it was crap. And so the day before the definitive trial, they dumped all their stock, made millions and millions and millions. Everyone who invested in it lost millions and millions and millions, and it disappeared, and everyone's pretty much forgotten about it now. But anyway, that's the kind of slime that you're seeing when you look at Vivek Ramaswamy's face. Does he look slimy? Yep, you're right. As slimy as boiled okra, that boy. So, and looking towards the, I'm sorry, you're about to say something?
I was going to back to the Powell strike. I promised I would find this information. I'd known I'd seen it. Here it is. And no, the Hawthorne store is fully open. Well, it opens at 10 o'clock. It's still going. I think they closed the Powell's Cooks and Garden store that was next to it, but the main Powell's Hawthorne store still exists. Picketing starts at 9:30 in the morning, and you can join and support picketers, striking workers on Monday, September 4th, Labor Day. What a fantastic way to spend a part of your Labor Day. Picketing starts at 9:30 at Powell's City of Books, and that's on 10th and Burnside downtown, at Powell's Books on Hawthorne, and that's at 37th and Hawthorne, Southeast Portland, and Powell's Books at Cedar Hills Crossing. That's at the Cedar Hills Crossing Mall, 3415 Southwest Cedar Hills. There's a 1 p.m. rally at the 10th and Burnside store. The 1 o'clock rally at 10th and Burnside, 9:30 a.m. pickets starting at all three locations. And I just think this is really the time to show solidarity. It's always a good time to show solidarity with workers, but my God, on Labor Day, yes, let's do it.
Do you know, is it a don't cross this line picket or is it an informational picket?
This is a don't cross this line picket.
All right, that's even more fun.
Do not cross
and
this
it's even
line.
more fun to go out and not cross. Go up to and do not cross the line. That makes it bigger and more
It's
fun.
also great to call Powell's management and tell them why you won't be shopping on Labor Day because you can't cross picket lines ever, and on Labor Day for sure. So get back to negotiating and give folks a living wage.
Go up there and say loudly, "Oh, I guess I'll go to Barnes and Ignoble."
You
don't have to actually do it.
Great, because they're not unionized at all.
That's right. But that's what will scare
Yeah.
So in international affairs,
we have an entirely different outlook on this. Carry on.
Do we?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I was telling Ani that I'm worried about World War III again. Here it is, worrying about World War III again, and every now
there's so much new to worry about. I don't know.
You just have to worry. You have to stay in practice every now and then. It's like ever since 1964, right? I actually didn't see Doctor Strangelove in 1964. It would have been way over my head. I was only 6 years old, but ever since I was old enough to understand it, I've loved that freaking movie. But it's about an accidental beginning to a nuclear exchange between the U.S. and Russia. But there are other scenarios which could result in the destruction of the entire planet with nuclear weapons, and I'm kind of worried about one right now. Let me give you some of the details that I'm looking at. One of them is that the Ukrainians have been very successful. I mean, and who can blame them? And I support them in terms of pushing the Russians off their territory. They've been very successful in shooting drones way into Russia. They have these leftover, frankly, Russian weapons. Well, not entirely Russian. The Ukrainian aerospace industry was quite advanced at the time the nations were severed. And they get things like what used to be called S-200 anti-aircraft missiles, which were for shooting down American planes that flew way high into the stratosphere. And turns out you can put a big old bomb on it and make it go blow up on the ground too. And so they've been doing that. And they've also developed cheap drones and expensive drones. And bottom line is they've shot something like, I don't know, hundreds of significant explosions have occurred way deep into Russian territory. And Russians know that they are at war at this point. And that's almost, the last couple of weeks, people are starting to admit past the propaganda, which is, if anything, as thick or thicker there than it is in the United States, that those explosions mean that someone's shooting back at them. So the distinction could be made that these are Ukrainian weapons, and indeed they are, and there are no U.S. weapons among them, but of course the U.S. is helping them build them, so it's a distinction without a difference.
I was going to say, that's not a distinction that Russia's likely to recognize.
Yeah, it's not going to stop the war widening. This is what I'm worried about. So Belarus is just on the edge of getting involved, and so that's Ukraine. And quoting the New York Times, with the counteroffensive going so slowly and American defense and intelligence officials beginning to blame the Ukrainians, Western governments are feeling more vulnerable after providing so much equipment and raising hopes. That's quoting Charles A. Kupchan, a professor at Georgetown University and a former American official. Have you been to Georgetown University?
I have not.
Oh, boy, a more wretched hive of. Well, anyway, the American hope, he said, was that the counteroffensive would succeed in threatening the Russian position in Crimea, which would put Ukraine in a stronger negotiating position. That has not happened, so the political atmosphere has tightened, and overall there's still a political taboo about a hard-headed conversation about the end game, and Mr. Kupchan knows of what he speaks, says the New York Times. He and Richard Haas, the former president of the Council on Foreign Relations, wrote a piece in Foreign Affairs in April urging Washington and its allies to come up with a plan from getting to the battlefield to the negotiating table, and were widely criticized for doing so. And just speaking for myself, I can see why they were criticized too, because, for example, many of those drones have hit Crimea. But being able to reach Crimea and make things go boom there is not the same as displacing the Black Sea Fleet, which is in Sevastopol. So, and Crimea is much larger, of course, than Sevastopol. And occupying Crimea is quite a task. And when they first said they were going to do it, my reaction was, wow, can they really do that? I mean, I don't know. How would I know? But so the situation on the ground is they gain some territory, but if you really, really look at the map, they just barely pick out, 1% or 2% of the territory at a time. Sometimes they get pushed back. There is a counteroffensive by the Russians. So it is kind of a stalemate on the ground. Meanwhile, these explosions are going off in Russia, and the Russians are getting increasingly freaked about it, which makes me think of the broader international war situation. Quoting CNN, the Biden administration has approved funding for the first ever transfer of U.S. military equipment to Taiwan under a program typically saved for sovereign nations, according to notifications sent to Congress on Tuesday. And why is this significant? Because Taiwan is a province of China. The U.S. promised the communist Chinese way back when Nixon went there that they would treat it as a sovereign province of China, except that they would kind of hang out there because they had business interests, and China could have it back someday, but not right now. And look at this aircraft carrier. It's a very complicated situation. There's talking out of both sides of the mouth on the American part. Not so much on the Chinese. Chinese have said, okay, we're ready to take it back. Screw you. for a long time, but they haven't had the capacity to do so. Now, this has changed rapidly. And the question is, can American defenses of Taiwan be overwhelmed by the Chinese? And previously it was, will the Americans defend Taiwan? There's still a little bit of that question because I don't know that the Americans have actually put enough equipment in and around Taiwan to mount an effective defense, which is interesting. Scary. Because they should go one way or the other. If you ask me, they should say, okay, never mind, we can't do this. You have the power over there. Sorry about that, Taiwan, and please please have elections rather than invade and punish the place. But the Chinese, under Xi Jinping thought, which you can actually get in bound volumes, I think they're up to volume 3 now, says that Taiwan is criminal and must be punished. And this is exactly what happened to Ukraine. Ukraine is criminal and must be punished. This is bullshit. I mean, before the invasion, which I really didn't think was going to happen of Ukraine, why are you poking me?
I think that was a look at the camera and talk because your voice is going off mic.
Oh,
Poke.
okay.
That was the poke of your friendly engineer help.
Thank you.
Who was attempting not to say the quiet part loud.
Okay. Have to be careful. I take lots of drugs. Sometimes words come out that have nothing to do with the narrative.
And that's why I poked you, darling. Look at your camera.
Good.
Look at your audience. They love you.
Good drugs. This conversation is brought to you today by Good Drugs. Anyway, where was I? So the Chinese, historically, the Chinese have had a habit militarily, frankly, of saying to the U.S., in the case of the invasion of Korea, the Chinese had a long game of saying, you'd better stop this. Gosh, we could intervene. You were thinking about it. And of course, the whole time they were building up the troops, and they did intervene. And they do like to do this, to talk about it and then to actually take action long before the U.S. actually takes action to prevent it. It's work, if it ain't broke, don't fix it for them. So I would say that there is really quite a danger of a Chinese invasion of Taiwan. Like now, this is the time. And that could easily get out of hand for a couple of reasons. One being that the Russians have been talking to the North Koreans and they want arms from North Korea. And I'm sure that they're going to get arms from North Korea because for the simple reason, if nothing else, their artillery shells are made for those guns. The bullets fit and those are the ones that they need. And so of course they're going to get them from North Korea because they've shot them all out. I see that the kitty has discovered a bag.
So sorry that is so loud. I tried to thwart it. It was not happening.
Yes, this bag rattle is brought to you by a little Mexican cat who gets less little all the time.
It's kind of giant. No. Okay,
so the thing is, geopolitically, they are the allies of the Chinese, and whether they get the green light or not, they might just decide to go after Seoul while all this is going on. This would aid the Chinese effort by diverting the Americans, looked at from just a basic logistical point of view. Just a couple nights ago, the North Koreans shot off a nuclear-capable missile at night, which they haven't done before. So we don't know exactly what they're trying to say with that, but it isn't good. We can say that. So,
generally, shooting off any kind of missile as a test or a, gee, look what we have is not good.
No, they do it all the time, but it's weird that they did it at night. And then they did follow it with talk about we could nuke Seoul.
And I'm just going to say, not good. Yeah, right.
I don't think they'd actually work because they probably can't shoot enough missiles past the Patriot barriers to nuke Seoul. But, it's not something you want to risk. And this brings us finally to the climate. Climate activists, according to...
Wait, this brings us to the climate?
Yes. Because the climate could either freeze in a nuclear winter or continue to roast us.
I see.
Which way will it go? The climate activists have spray painted a boat, blocked private planes from taking off, and covered holes in golf courses over the summer, according to VOA. These actions are part of a campaign against the lifestyles of very rich people who, the activists say, release a lot of carbon pollution into the atmosphere. And I just like to say, the way Voice of America, which was started by the CIA, likes to hedge things. As flooding, storms, and wildfires take place around the world, was that to look into the camera? Okay, I can't.
I know.
Climate activists have also turned to new measures to call attention to these bad weather events. Some activists glued themselves to a road in Germany. Others threw soup on Vincent van Gogh's painting in Britain. and they caused delays in sporting events, including a Formula One Grand Prix race car competition and the Tour de France bicycle race. And we noticed, maybe you noticed, that they blocked the road to Burning Man, and oh boy, did that cause the Nevada cops to just go nuts. They were roaring around, smashing the barricades with their trucks and pulling guns and shouting, and they were just so angry.
Yeah.
It's funny to see Nevada cops. Nevada cops, of course, weren't actually standing up for the environment. They just hate anything that gets in the way with all the cash that comes into that economy from Burning Man. And that is what I have to say about this week's going on.
I see. Well, I got one thing to add as we're looking at the climate.
Okay.
And that is, you surprise me, madame, by your rather quick wrap up there when the in the climate stuffs.
No, I've got 32 minutes into the hour. Not bad, eh?
Yeah. Well, there you are. So I was just going to mention that it looks like there is a report from the Biden Infrastructure Advisory Council that is actually looking at privatizing water distribution systems in the U.S. This is from Common Dreams. I'm just going to read the opening paragraph or two. President Biden should never, ever have appointed an investment banker to chair an advisory council for the nation's infrastructure, said one advocate. The Under the Radar report by U.S. President Joe Biden's National Infrastructure Advisory Council should not go unnoticed. The Food and Water Watch Group looked at the document yesterday and said that deeply buried in the document is a call for the privatization of U.S. water systems, which, of course, is a super bad idea when we have something that is, in fact, necessary for the continuation of human life. We do not want it privatized. We do not want it in a suddenly for-profit environment. This does not bring quality, right? I mean, we need to boost the infrastructure. We need to actually fix the nation's water supply, but to do it in a for-profit company, I don't think that's really going to help us, right? For-profit prisons haven't improved the quality of prisons.
So it'd sort of be the Nestle of aqueducts, huh?
You know, that's sort of what I'm seeing. It's really just anathema of a good practice and a compassionate government. On page 15 of the 38-page report, the watchdog group said that the federal government should remove barriers to privatization, concessions, and other non-traditional models of funding community water systems in conjunction with each state's developed best practices. So I'm just going to go ahead and leave it there. That's really bleak. And we need to actually, I think, make loud citizen cry across the country saying, no, this is absolutely not not happening, not on our watch. We do not need to see what happens when we privatize water supplies, as has happened in many developing nations. Not a good idea. I'm just going to leave it there.
I can only agree.
All right. So are you, in fact, finished then?
Yep, that wraps it up for me.
All right. Let's see here. I has, of course, this week's tarot reading. I hear so many friends saying, yay, it's fall. Fall is here already. And technically, I do think that's true. In the calendar I always like to keep, which looks at the solstices and the equinoxes sort of more as the midpoints than the beginnings of things. Sort of the high point of the season. Then it's true, once we get past Lammas and the first of the harvest festivals, we are heading into fall. And that's certainly one way to look at it. I'm looking forward to a little return of sun, a little swan song, if you will, because I really do love hot days. I do. I love sunny weather. I love hot days. Yes, I was born in Portland. Yes, I have lived here most of my life. And I love the rain. I super duper love the rain. I'm super excited that it has been raining and that you can sort of smell and see refreshment. Hopefully this is also helping with the wildfires that are just kind of out of control. But I want to see a little more sun and a little more, summer in my fall, I guess is what I'm trying to say. That's as may be. Um, I went ahead and I did this year it's tarot reading, and looking at these cards here, we have Judgment, we have the Queen of Pentacles, and we have the Five of Swords inversed. And so, what does this all mean? Um, you are likely being your own harshest critic, also maybe an accurate critic, as there's likely some kind of conflict going on right now in your life. It may be at a turning point, and it's probably a good time to really take stock of um, what your values are, how your behavior has been involved in this conflict, how you have what you want to see coming out of the conflict, and then to really pursue it um, in a patient way, staying grounded, and making sure, again, you're keeping your eyes on the prize, if you will, thinking again about what your values are and what you are hoping to attain, what you are hoping to maintain in the conflict. And with that as your sort of guidepost, to behave accordingly, to seek to resolve the conflict in a good way that leaves you feeling like you have participated to the best of your ability and done what you need to do, and you can hold your head high. So, with that, that's the tarot for the week. And yeah, I guess I have one more thing to throw in there, and that is I will be starting a tarot class for folks who are interested in tarot curious, folks that have done tarot for a while but want to get a little more into it with a little more depth, from the absolute beginner to folks who are dabbling and want deeper insights and connections to their cards. This class is for you. So there will be. Um, I will I will put a link to my website. You can contact me through my website. I'll put a link to my website in the description box here in just the next few minutes. If you are interested in taking this class, it is a 6-week class in tarot. We will start meeting on Tuesday evening at 6 o'clock, Tuesday, the 12th of September, and 5 Tuesdays thereafter, 6 Tuesdays in all. If you are interested in registering, please do. We have about 4 spots left, and it would be great to see you in the class. You can direct message me by any means that you may already have, or I will go ahead and put a link to my semi-functional website in the description box. And if you are interested in the class, please contact me that way. Right.
And if you know someone who needs room in Portland and can steadily contribute to expenses, then put them in contact with us.
All right. So with that, we are at the end of our show.
But not the end of my phlegm.
And the end of Teresa's voice, perhaps.
Yeah. So.
And with that, we go out. And we'll see you next week, next Friday morning at 9 o'clock. God willing, and the creek don't rise.
Our love goes out to you and to all the ships at sea. Bye-bye. See you soon.